Okay, hello and welcome. So in this video, I'm going to do a walkthrough of some exercises that would be good for like a section discussion, like on Thursday or Friday with the intermediate or introductory micro course. Matter of fact, these are going to follow pretty closely to the Stevenson and Wolfers text. So decisions with private information. So I'll go over each of the exercises, then I'll walk through the solution. So first I'll just show this entire sheet and then I'll go over the solution. So first, that'll give you the opportunity to stop the video, work through on your own. So first, briefly describe the concept of adverse selection. Explain why it may result in a death spiral in private markets for health insurance. What role might the government mandate that all individuals what role may the government mandate that all individuals must have health insurance play in mitigating this outcome? Shirin is an unsupervised salesperson for a small internet advertising firm. Shirin is paid $100 each day, no matter how many sales Shirin makes. What issue might this compensation arrangement lead to? What are some possible solutions? Briefly explain. Consider the used car market, where sellers have full information regarding the cars that they are selling, and answer the following questions in the space provided below. What role does the existence of private information play in this market? What's the likely outcome? Briefly explain your reasoning. Would this be an example of moral hazard, adverse selection by sellers, adverse selection by buyers? What type of solutions might be available to help mitigate this private information problem? Briefly explain. And then this IV, that 4, that's a trick. It's not there. Briefly explain why private information is likely to be present in the market for auto insurance. Explain why it is likely this type of private information may lead individuals who are good drivers to choose not to buy insurance unless required to do so by law. What might happen in the auto insurance market if all drivers, good and bad, were not required by law to purchase auto insurance? Briefly explain. And then 5, Briggs offers Shane the following bet. Flip a coin. If it comes up heads, Briggs pays Shane $200. However, if it comes up tails, Shane will pay Briggs $200. Is Briggs offering Shane a monetarily fair bet? Briefly explain. If Shane refuses this bet, what does this suggest about Shane's attitude towards risk? Use a diagram with utility on the vertical axis and dollars on the horizontal to illustrate your answer. All right, so we'll go ahead and discuss that. First, puppy study break. Puppy study break. There's our puppy. All right. I'll come back to that picture in a second. So briefly describe the concept of adverse selection, why it might result in a death spiral in private markets for health insurance. What role might the government mandate that all individuals must have health insurance play in mitigating this outcome? Well, the greater the likelihood of a problem, the more likely somebody's going to want to buy insurance. So those who are anticipating that they're going to have health problems are going to be more interested in buying insurance. So the problem is the seller is not able to identify this characteristic in consumers. So the problem is, at the existing premiums, only those who are likely to need health insurance are going to be interested in buying. But that's a problem because then there's higher payouts per policy. On average, people who are buying the policies are having more expensive, are using the policy. So that's more expensive for the health insurance company. And the problem is this ultimately leads to this death spiral where the market goes away. The government mandate that everybody must buy health insurance mitigates the outcome by eliminating the selection. It takes away the opportunity, the scope for those who are low risk to avoid purchasing insurance. All right. Shirin is an unsupervised salesperson in a small internet firm. Shirin is paid $100 each day, no matter how many sales Shirin makes. What issue might this compensation arrangement lead to? What are some problems? Briefly explain. So here's my example with moral hazard and with shirking. So here I am at the amusement park. This is many years ago. However, I was paid per hour to work at this amusement park, operating rides like this Ferris wheel you see here. In my video on moral hazard, I talk about Kittyland, which is way back here. You can see this off in the distance, where you can kind of hide out and not run rides after a certain point at night. That is exactly shirking. That's moral hazard. That's a problem. And that's the issue in this particular example. Shirin is paid $100 no matter how many sales Shirin makes, just like I was paid hourly wage no matter how many people came on the ride. This is an example of a principal agent dilemma. Given the current arrangement, Shirin may lack the incentive to do more than the minimum amount of work. The employer, the principal, might prefer Shirin to work as hard as possible, but Sharin's not going to. So similarly, in the amusement park, my employer would have liked me to work as hard as possible and give as many rides as possible, but it was easy to shirk and to pretend the ride was broken and just to sit behind the ride and pretend like no one's there and not have to give many rides. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Possible solutions involve tying Sharin's salary to profit-sharing arrangement, commissions, other ways to tie pay to performance. In my amusement park example, if they would have paid me per ticket that I brought back to the office, then I would have had an incentive to have more people go on the ride. Consider the used car market where sellers have full information regarding the cars that they're selling and answer the following questions in the space provided. What role does the existence of private information play in this market? What's the likely outcome? Would this be an example of moral hazard, adverse selection by sellers, adverse selection by buyers? What types of solutions might be available to help mitigate this type of private information problem? Explain. Well, what role does the existence of private information have? Well, the sellers have full information about the value of the cars. The buyers don't. So the buyers are going to have to guess as to the average quality, the expected value of a randomly selected car. And that's a problem because the sellers with relatively higher quality cars might prefer not to sell them, especially if they're not able to command a price that's at least up to their willingness to accept. If this is the case, this is going to cause the average quality of cars for sale to fall, meaning the expectation that buyers have for a randomly selected car is going to fall as well. This leads to the situation where buyers are only going to be willing to pay lower prices. This is our death spiral, meaning that this will destroy the market for the good cars. Only bad cars will be available to sell. This is an example of adverse selection by sellers. This is going to be the problem where, on average, bad selection. Bad cars will be those offered for sale. What are the solutions? Well, buyers could learn from third-party verifiers. So think of like Carfax or Carfax. Think of like TrueCar, stuff like that. If you could take the car to a mechanic to have an assessment. Government can increase information, so that's not as big of a deal in the used car market, but in the financial market, that's a huge deal where the government might help increase information in terms of the credit worthiness of different potential borrowers. Sellers can signal their quality. Well, that can be done through like guarantees or warranties. In the case of the labor market, people signal their quality by virtue of their resume. And so, for instance, if you graduate from an elite school, then presumably you're signaling high quality. All right, so briefly explain why private information is likely to be present in the market for auto insurance. Explain, as a result, why it's likely this type of private information may lead individuals who are good drivers not to choose to buy insurance unless they're required to. This is a lot like the health insurance example. Is this moral hazard or adverse selection? It could be either story. If you want to tell the adverse selection story, you'd say, well, risky drivers know how risky they are. The insurer doesn't. So as a result, the existing premiums based on the average driver may cause good drivers to decide not to purchase. This leads to higher payouts per policy because more of the policy holders are bad drivers and they're therefore using the policy more. Ultimately, this leads to higher premiums, but at the higher premiums, fewer of the less risky drivers are going to be interested in buying. This is our death spiral, and then ultimately the market will go away because only bad drivers would be interested in buying the insurance, and then that would be very unprofitable. The moral hazard story would be, well, once you've got coverage, you might take fewer precautions, drive on icy roads or whatever. Therefore, the risk is rising, and so the insurance costs are going to rise. And what's happening then is, well, fewer people are buying insurance as a result of the insurance price rising. All right, and the last one, Briggs is offering Shane this fair bet. Indeed, it is a fair bet. Since the outcome is equally likely on average, Shane will be left with the same amount of money. So the expected value is gain $200 50% of the time, lose $200 50% of the time. On average, the expected value is zero. Though, remember how expected values work. This is interesting. This is an average. This is in expectation. Never is there a situation where Shane is left with exactly zero. Shane is either left 200 ahead or 200 behind. If we repeated this bet every day on the long run with a fair coin, we'd expect that Shane's expected value outcome would be zero over the course of a year, for instance. If Shane's unwilling to accept a fair bet, this suggests that Shane is risk averse. And so the picture we would have would be this one. We have our 200 loss, our 200 gain. We have our utility on the vertical axis, and we notice the concavity of the utility. And so we have this for the same 200 loss or the same 200 gain, we have measured a larger vertical distance here than here. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Go ahead and conclude here.